It was Thursday morning, October 3, 2019. Flight BA 449 took off from London Heathrow at 8:45 a.m. The destination was New York JFK. The aircraft was a Boeing 777 carrying 271 passengers and 12 crew members. The sky above England was grey and low with autumn clouds. Below, the city of London disappeared quickly as the aircraft climbed through the overcast and broke into clear blue sky above. Seat 22A belonged to a woman named Rachel Voss. She was 41 years old. Dark brown hair pulled back simply. Calm blue eyes. She wore a plain gray sweater and black trousers. She had a small travel bag under the seat in front of her and a paperback novel open on her tray table. Black coffee, no sugar, sat in the cup holder beside her. To the elderly couple sitting across the aisle, she looked like any quiet professional traveling alone. Nothing special. Nothing remarkable. But Rachel Voss had not been a normal traveler for a very long time. She had spent 15 years flying F-15 Eagles for the United States Air Force. She had logged 4,100 flight hours and completed 301 combat missions. She was promoted to full colonel at 38. Her call sign, given to her by the pilots she flew alongside during her first combat deployment, was Viper. They called her Viper because of the way she flew. Fast, exact, decisive. She moved through the sky the way a viper moved through grass. No wasted motion. Perfect timing. Strike at exactly the right moment and withdraw before anything could go wrong. She had retired 6 months ago. She had taken a position as an air defense consultant for NATO. She was on this flight returning from a security conference in London, heading home to Virginia. She was not supposed to be needed today. 2 hours and 6 minutes into the flight, Rachel felt something change. It was not a sound. It was not a smell. It was a feeling that lived somewhere deep below conscious thought, in the part of her nervous system that 15 years of flying combat aircraft had permanently rewired. A tiny shift in the angle of the floor beneath her feet. A very slight change in the pressure inside the cabin. A difference so small that every single one of the 271 passengers around her felt absolutely nothing. But Rachel Voss was not every passenger. She put her novel face down on the tray table. She looked out the window. The sky was deep blue and perfectly clear over the North Atlantic. Far below, a flat white layer of clouds stretched in every direction across the ocean. No turbulence. No strange sounds from the engines. Nothing that would cause any concern to a normal traveler. But the sunlight coming through her window was hitting from the wrong angle. 2 hours into a westbound transatlantic flight meant they should be heading west-northwest, pushing toward the American coast with the jet stream behind them. The sunlight should be coming from high and behind, hitting the left side of the aircraft. Instead, it was coming from slightly ahead and to the right. The difference was small, barely noticeable. But to someone who had spent thousands of hours reading the position of the sun from a cockpit to navigate by dead reckoning when instruments failed, it was as obvious as a wrong turn on a familiar street. They had changed course. She listened to the engines, the familiar steady hum. Then, underneath it, a very slight increase in power output. Just enough for a trained ear to catch. Pilots increased thrust when they needed to make up time. They needed to make up time when they had deviated significantly from their planned route. Wrong direction plus increased engine power meant one thing. This was not a small routine correction. Something had gone wrong with the navigation, and the crew had noticed, and they were trying to fix it. She put her book into her bag. She looked out the window again, but this time she was not looking at the clouds below. She was looking at the sky around and above the aircraft, scanning the way she had scanned it from the cockpit on hundreds of combat air patrols, looking for shapes that did not belong in peaceful open sky. She found them in 40 seconds. 2 thin white contrails at 11 o'clock high, descending at a steep and specific angle. The precise descending approach that fighter pilots used when closing fast on an aircraft they needed to intercept. She recognized that angle the way she would recognize her own handwriting. She had used it herself more times than she could count. She had taught it to younger pilots at Nellis Air Force Base over 6 years of instructing. She knew exactly what those contrails meant. She stood up from seat 22A. She did not rush. She did not look left or right at the passengers around her. She picked up her travel bag, stepped calmly into the aisle, and walked toward the front of the aircraft with the controlled, steady pace of someone whose training had made emergency response as natural as breathing. In the cockpit, Captain Michael Brennan had been aware of the problem for 11 minutes. A navigation computer error had pushed the aircraft 14 degrees north of their planned track. By the time First Officer Claire Yates had identified the fault and begun correcting course, they had already flown 9 miles inside airspace they had no clearance to enter. A military-restricted zone that had been declared active and closed 1 hour and 40 minutes earlier. An emergency notice had been transmitted to all aircraft in the region. Due to a combination of the navigation fault and a system receiving lag, BA 449 had never received it. The warning receiver on the instrument panel was now producing a sound that Michael Brennan had heard once before in a simulator exercise 22 years ago and had prayed every day since never to hear in an actual aircraft. A continuous high-pitched tone, steady and relentless. Active military fire control radar. Not search radar. Not identification radar. Fire control radar. The specific type used to track a target and guide a weapon to it with precision. Through the cockpit windscreen, 2 gray F-15 Eagles were visible off the left wing. Close. Their weapons pylons carried live ordnance. The radio broke through every other frequency with a voice that was professional and young and completely without emotion. BA 449. You are in violation of emergency restricted military airspace declared at 0700 Zulu. You have 30 seconds to acknowledge and begin immediate turn to heading 260 or we are authorized to engage. This is your final warning. Claire pulled the emergency restricted zone notice onto her screen. She found it in seconds. The coordinates, the declared time, the boundaries, their current position sat directly in the middle of it. She looked at Michael. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke. They had 20 seconds left on the clock. Then someone knocked on the cockpit door. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. A very specific rhythm. A pattern that military pilots use to identify themselves at secured cockpit doors during joint operations. A knock that meant, I am one of you. Open the door. Claire opened it with wide and frightened eyes. She saw a woman in a gray sweater, calm face, blue eyes that were reading the situation with the focused precision of a surgeon looking at an injury. Not panicked, not confused, already working. My name is Rachel Voss, the woman said, quietly enough that no passenger nearby could hear. Colonel, United States Air Force, retired April 2019. Call sign Viper. I am a former F-15 pilot. I spent 6 years as a combat tactics instructor at Nellis. I know the protocols those pilots outside are following because I helped write them. Let me on the radio right now. Claire stepped back without a word. Rachel walked in. Michael Brennan stared at her for 2 full seconds. She did not look like a fighter pilot. She looked like a professional woman who had been reading a novel in economy class 3 minutes ago. He looked at her eyes. He made a decision. He handed her the headset. She was already reaching for it. Rachel Voss had not held a military radio headset in 6 months. She had been living a civilian life, consulting work, meetings and reports. She pressed the transmit button. But the moment the headset went over her ears, the voice that came out of her was not the voice of a NATO consultant returning from a conference. It was the voice of Viper. This is Colonel Rachel Voss, call sign Viper, United States Air Force, retired April 2019. I am a passenger aboard BA 449. I am an F-15 qualified pilot and former air combat instructor. Nellis AFB 2013 to 2019. Identify yourself. She released the button. The frequency went completely silent. Not the silence of a dead radio. The silence of someone on the other end receiving information that did not fit any expected scenario and processing it very quickly. 5 seconds passed. Michael and Claire did not breathe. A new voice came on, older than the first, the measured weight of command behind it. Say again your last. Did you say call sign Viper? She pressed transmit. Affirmative. Call sign Viper. F-15 Eagle qualified pilot. Air Combat Instructor, Nellis AFB Tactical Evaluation Program, 2013 to 2019. Who am I speaking with? A pause. Then, Colonel Voss. This is Lieutenant Colonel Dan Mercer, Intercept Commander. Ma'am, I have active orders. BA 449 is in unauthorized restricted airspace during a live fire exercise. We are authorized to engage. I know exactly what you are authorized to do, she said. Her voice was level. No urgency, no fear. The voice of someone stating a fact. I helped write the authorization protocols you are following right now, and I know they include commander's discretion for ambiguous threat situations. I need you to apply that discretion. Give me 60 seconds. She did not wait for his answer. BA 449 is a British Airways Boeing 777. It departed London Heathrow this morning. It is carrying 271 civilian passengers and 12 crew members. This aircraft entered your restricted zone because of a navigation computer fault combined with a receiving lag that prevented the crew from getting your emergency notice. There is no hostile intent. There is no threat of any kind. This is a commercial flight full of ordinary people who have no idea what is happening outside their windows right now. She stopped. She let the silence work. Mercer's voice came back. Colonel, the protocol is clear. Any unauthorized aircraft inside a declared restricted zone during active operations. I know the protocol, she said, cutting across him with the exact firmness of someone who had written that protocol herself. I also know that protocol exists to help commanders make correct decisions in real situations, not to replace judgment. You are the intercept commander. You have the authority and the responsibility to assess the real threat in front of you. I am giving you the accurate information you need to do that. She nodded to Michael. He immediately began the turn, banking the big Boeing gently to the right, swinging onto heading 260. This aircraft is turning to your instructed heading right now. We are in full compliance. We are leaving your airspace. But I need you to stand down those weapons before this moment becomes something that none of us can take back. Silence on the frequency. She held the transmit button halfway. Ready. She had been in moments like this before. Not in a passenger cabin. In a cockpit at altitude with seconds left on a decision clock. She had talked a young pilot out of firing on a misidentified target over Syria in 2016. She had done it in the same way she was doing it now. With accurate information, delivered in the tone of someone who already knew the outcome because they had already done the analysis. She pressed transmit one more time. She used his first name. Dan, you have been trained for exactly this kind of moment. You know what a real threat looks like. You know what a navigation mistake looks like. Everything you can verify right now is telling you this is a mistake. The aircraft is turning to your heading. The crew is cooperating completely. There are 271 civilians in this cabin. Make the call your training prepared you to make. 26 seconds of silence followed. Then the frequency changed. Not the tone of the voice, the weight behind it. The voice of a man who had made a decision and was standing fully behind it. BA 449, this is Intercept Commander. Weapons are being stood down. Maintain heading 260. Descend to flight level 310. We will escort you clear of the restricted zone. Rachel exhaled through her nose. Slowly, quietly. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Mercer. That was the right call. A brief pause. Then Mercer's voice again, lower. Something different underneath the military professionalism. Colonel Voss, ma'am, when you came on this frequency, my team had 11 seconds left on the engagement clock. We nearly did not respond. But your call sign is in our advanced tactics curriculum. Every pilot in this unit has studied your Baghdad engagement from 2007. I gave you 60 seconds because of that name. Rachel said nothing. She waited. You were right about everything, Mercer continued. Navigation fault confirmed by transponder data. Transmission lag confirmed by our own receiving logs. Aircraft turning before you finished your first transmission. And you did not plead. You did not ask for mercy. You gave us facts in the voice of someone who already knew what those facts meant. She looked out through the cockpit windscreen at the F-15 flying formation off the left wing. Gray and powerful and beautiful in the specific way that aircraft built for that purpose were always beautiful. "I warned you," she said quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. A simple, plain statement of fact. "Call sign Viper. I warned you what I knew and who I was. And you listened. That is why 271 people go home today." A long silence on the frequency. Then Dan Mercer's voice, quiet and sure. "Yes, ma'am. That is exactly why. Fly safe, Dan. You too, Colonel. Viper out. Viper out." She handed the headset back to Michael. Her hand was completely steady. It had been steady the entire time. The escort lasted 28 minutes. 2 F-15 Eagles flying tight formation alongside the Boeing 777. Visible through the cabin windows on the left side of the aircraft. Passengers pressed their faces to the glass and took photographs. A boy in row 14 told his mother he had never seen anything so amazing. A retired pilot in business class watched with tears in his eyes and said nothing at all. Nobody in the cabin knew what had happened 40 feet ahead of them in the cockpit. Nobody knew about the fire control radar lock. Nobody knew about the 30-second countdown clock. Nobody knew about the woman in seat 22A who had stood up from her novel and her cold coffee and walked forward and picked up a radio and stopped everything with 15 years of training and one name. When the aircraft cleared the restricted boundary, the 2 F-15s peeled away in a single climbing turn. Afterburners briefly lit, orange glow visible through the windows for just a moment before they climbed away at a speed that made the heavy Boeing appear to be standing still. Gone in 15 seconds. Just empty sky where they had been. Rachel walked back down the aisle to seat 22A. She sat down. She took her book out of her bag. She found her page. The elderly couple across the aisle were watching the empty sky where the jets had been. The woman turned and looked at Rachel. "Were those military planes?" she asked. "Yes," Rachel said. "Everything is fine now." The woman nodded and turned back to the window. Rachel kept reading. BA 449 landed at JFK 4 hours and 20 minutes later. Behind schedule but with 271 passengers and 12 crew members all safe. Captain Michael Brennan filed his incident report that evening. He also wrote a separate document, not required by any procedure, describing exactly what had happened in the cockpit during those 60 seconds. He named Rachel Voss. He stated clearly that her presence and her actions had transformed a situation with a very uncertain outcome into one with a certain and safe one. 6 weeks later, Rachel received a short message from Lieutenant Colonel Dan Mercer. It said, "Colonel Voss, my engagement decision was reviewed at command level and found to be a correct application of commander's discretion. I wanted you to know that the principle you applied in that cockpit, giving a commander accurate information and trusting him to make the right call, that is what your curriculum teaches. I was applying what I learned from your materials. Thank you for writing them down. And thank you for being on that flight." She read it twice. She wrote back 3 sentences. "You already knew how to make that call, Dan. I only reminded you that you knew it. The best pilots always know when not to fire." She sent it and returned to her work. Some things do not leave you when you hand back your flight suit. Some training does not expire on retirement day. Some call signs stay with you not because anyone still uses them but because they are accurate. They describe exactly who you are. Colonel Rachel Voss. Seat 22A. Novel in her lap. Coffee going cold on the tray table. Watching the sky the way she had always watched it. Always Viper.